Sithokoze ningahlala phasi. I want to welcome you all, more especially our guests in the gallery. Just a reminder to our guests that you cannot participate in the processes of this EPC. When I talk of participation, I'm actually referring to just to remind ourselves. I will now ask the secretary to read the order.
Debate on vote number 6, International Relations and Cooperation Appropriation Bill.
Thank you very much. I will now invite the Honorable Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable Sisulu, to open the debate for us.
Point of order, Chairperson. Ngiyabonga baba besifuna ukwazi ukuthi indaba singanikezwa ngathi niphepha lisho ukuthi sidebate. Okwesibili ayikho igarali la nangazi noma mhlambe kwenzakalani bona sisonke la. Ake sitsheleni mfana.
Okay, the service staff will assist you, ma'am, with I think she's talking about the speakers list. Please assist members with speakers list. I'm sorry, Honorable Minister, can we talk about that, help you, and then as she speaks? Okay, so what happened again? Okay, Honorable Minister, we apologize for that. Please continue and open the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, House Chair. Honorable members, invited guests, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Makaula, may I proceed? Ngiyabonga. This year marks the centenary of Nelson Mandela, a world icon that we have produced. This is 1 year in which we should once again use the space created by Nelson Mandela to leapfrog into a future that we all dreamt of. It is an especially important year for us as we invite the world to focus on the example that we have set for the rest of mankind. We need to drive the celebration of this man who not only led us into this democracy, but one who captured the world's imagination on what is possible. We had the most fertile ground on which to build on further and work on the immense work of Oliver Tambo in our international relations. Mandela picked up the baton from Oliver Tambo and charted our foreign policy in the new dispensation. And we remember him for what he bequeathed to us: freedom, peace, and forgiveness. And the world opened its arms to us. We once were a giant in the world, and our reputation was very well known because of what we represented. The world was richer for giving us the support that they gave us, and it was richer for what we gave them in the miracle of 1994. In Mandela's memory, in his honor, we have a responsibility to regain the stature that he left us, the stature that allowed us to punch above our weight and succeed. We'll regain that stature and put all our efforts in making sure that we make a world a better place for all its people. We should not be in a world where our children inherit the ruins of Syria. Our children should not live in fear of extremist militants. Our children should not die in the hands of heavy-handed soldiers. Our children should not die in poverty. We are faced with major external challenges. Poverty, where an Oxfam report of this year indicates that 8 billionaires own the same wealth as half of the poorest countries in the world. We live in the world where one of the other challenges is extremism. resulting in an increase in defense spending, abuse or disregard of international law. We live in a world where there is an unraveling of global governance systems and the weakening of diplomacy, the increasing tendency of some countries to reduce the complex and interrelated problems of the world to narrow national interests, a global crisis of leadership and governance resulting in corruption, abuse of power, and state resources. We in South Africa are now in the 5th dispensation, or administration, whichever way you look at it, ushered in by a painful but typically South African, very peaceful transition to the transition of President Ramaphosa. This new era is colloquially known as the New Dawn. It is a period of renewal, of change, of adherence to good governance, and responsiveness to our people. It is a time for re-energizing our foreign policy, which is anchored in our constitution and driven by our domestic policy. The two, as you know, have a symbiotic relationship. Our domestic policies are changing very rapidly, and we have to respond by reconfiguring our foreign policy. We want to usher in a new world where South Africa can lift itself out of poverty, inequality, and regain its stature in the world as a model of what can be achieved in our lifetime. When we stretch human endeavor to its limit and make possible that which seemed unattainable. We want South Africa to be once again a moral compass and a voice of reason in a world increasingly overcome with selfish, narrow interests. We want to be the hope for all people in times of despair. Our foreign policy has evolved over many years, crafted by Oliver Tambo, as I indicated, as he sensitized the world during our struggle for a liberated South Africa. It was crystallized and given expression by Nelson Mandela as he put South Africa firmly with your permission, Chair, you will give me back the time. Thank you, thank you. We will come to that, Honorable Makaula. Our foreign policy has evolved over years, and Nelson Mandela put it firmly on the international stage. What Madam Madikizela did was to make sure that we put women at the center of that particular policy. All of this was summarized very aptly in the 54th National Conference Declaration of the ANC, and I quote, it said, "We remain committed to the founding values of the struggle for a humane, just, equitable, democratic, and free world," close quote. We have over time been consolidating it, and it boils down to this: a better life for all of us equally as South Africans, black and white, a better life for our continent, rich and poor, a better life for the world, rich and poor, embedded in a desire to create and preserve peace at all times. Our Constitution determines that our foreign policy must be driven by 7 major principles. 1, fundamentally transform and achieve sustainable growth of the economy to empower the people and create a better life for all. 2, deal with the legacies of apartheid colonialism. 3, maintain the stability and security of South Africa, including the constitutional order and its institutions. 4, develop a peaceful and prosperous integrated Southern Africa. 5, develop a stable, prosperous African continent which is not marginalized in world affairs. 6, resolve conflicts by negotiation. I want to repeat that. Resolve conflicts by negotiation. 7, develop a multipolar, just, equitable world order. This is what our Constitution enjoins us to do. South Africa's approach to and implementation of our foreign policy must be based on an understanding of the current regional and global politics and economic realities at all times. This defines our response to the United States of America when it undertook a unilateral decision to withdraw from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action between Iran and the P5+1, eliminates the prospects of a nuclear attack across the Middle East. Essentially, this plan limits Iran's nuclear capability by restricting uranium enrichment and stockpiling of enriched uranium and technology that may be used in its facilities. And it imposes strict international monitoring by the IAEA in exchange for lifting multilateral and unilateral economic sanctions. We in South Africa have been particularly active in creating this environment around Iran and have expressed our deep displeasure at the possible erosion of the work that has gone into creating this environment. We believe in a global system that has been developed and structured to ensure that never again will we experience a war. This system is established to ensure that we never again slide to the levels of destruction that we have had for so many years. The fundamentals of our foreign policy are based on human rights, peace, equality, freedom from oppression and racism, freedom from poverty. This is our focus, first and foremost on the African continent. We remain an important player on the African continent, and our role has been aptly described as pivotal, and we intend to keep it that way. The renaissance that we dreamed of is still possible in our lifetime. In fact, the African Renaissance remains a key objective of the ANC, confirmed at its 54th National Conference. However, our importance depends on getting ourselves out of the problems that surround us right now. A country mired in its own problems can hardly expect to make an impact on the world stage. Our potential to influence for good is enormous, based on our history. We can continue to be the moral campus of the world because we need to. We continue to fight against injustice because we have to. We who have suffered so much can ill afford the suffering of anybody in any part of the world. Our global reality throws up unpredictable, dangerous environments. An eminent US opinion shaper, the Atlantic Council, predicted in 2016 that between 2020 and 2030, the years, the world will be characterized by a spiraling inequality, perpetual war, and insecurity. This world will be marked by a breakdown of order, widespread violent extremism, and aggressive larger states. This world situation will be driven by unprecedented and unpredictable events, including the possibility of nuclear exchange. This lays the foundation of what we should avoid at all times. Today, we are witnessing the manifestations of such predictions: the growing tensions between the US and China, the growing tensions between NATO and Russia, the escalating war in Syria, the growing tensions in Iran, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, all could lead to a nuclear confrontation between major powers, which threatens the very essence of our existence and humanity as we know it. It is within this unpredictable, highly volatile environment that we are constantly asked to recalibrate our foreign policy, but never lose sight of the central thrust of peace, human rights, and equality. Driven by the desire to moderate extremes, we have opted to stand for the non-permanent seat of the United Nations Security Council, through which we hope to collaborate with all countries committed to the objective of peace and security. We do not do this out of vanity, but pure, rugged, brutal necessity and the willingness to lend a hand and keep peace in the world. Our track record, the track record we hold speaks for itself in our request to hold this position. Honorable members, we've already been informed, I'm sure, of the establishment of the panel of review, whom I hope you will have invited, and I recognize them there. These are all eminent, experienced diplomats produced by the ANC, produced by this government. I am told that some uninformed journalists recently asked how many times there should be a review of policies in this department. The basic premise of our foreign policy remains as it is articulated above, endorsed in the National Development Plan, confirmed by the African National Congress, but it needs intermittent review because the world is not static. It is ever-changing, characterized by periods of potential crisis and power dynamics. In this turbulent world, we need to sharpen our tools to ensure that we respond to this from the basis of our own conviction to ensure a better world to live in. In short, we will review our policies when and if and at times when the world changes. The review panel has already started working on the review of our policies and will be assisting me in various forms. They have the requisite experience, and it will be our loss not to use them in what we have invested in them. And I thank them for coming forward to assist me. The President has chosen as a focal point for both domestic and foreign policy the issue of economic revival. South Africa has one of the highest unemployment figures in the world. The number of unemployed is estimated at just 6 million, even though over the past decade, the public sector has invested 2.2 trillion in economic and social infrastructure. Government's consolidated spending for 2018 for social development alone is 259 billion, up from 234 billion in the previous year. That goes to show how much we're investing in assisting the poor. However, we remain with this big problem of huge unemployment. Our unemployment figures remain stubbornly high and have the potential to derail socio-economic stability, making it a non-negotiable that South Africa needs to create jobs to fight high unemployment. To stimulate skills development and entrepreneurship requires us to simultaneously ensure that the people outside of the economy are brought into a productive activity and empower them to help themselves out of poverty. Out of this realization, the President has decided to host an investment summit to which we will invite major trade partners, major investors, and heads of state. We intend to make this a defining feature of this administration. The trust that South Africa has enjoyed as an investment destination has been eroded over time. This has been seen as a decline in ratings by two prominent ratings agencies to sub-investment grade or junk status. However, over the past few months, we have made great strides to create an environment in which our investment partners feel and are able to depend on us as dependable partners. Rating agencies Moody's in March 2018 revised ourselves upwards, and the outlook now is positive. The President's target is to raise 1 trillion in investment over a 5-year period, which will not only see South Africa get itself out of poverty, but will also benefit the continent. We believe that if we create a stable Africa, we can unleash a huge potential. The resources of this continent are enormous, and properly tapped will change the fortunes of the whole continent for generations to come. We continue to be committed to peace. We stand for peaceful solutions whenever there is conflict. Our track record of keeping peace on the African continent is unchallenged by any country in the world. Our efforts in creating dialogue are a hallmark of our foreign policy. We have had great successes in the past on the continent, and we will continue to put this as the apex of our intervention. South Africa adheres to the general principles of international law, including, amongst others, respect for territorial integrity of other states, especially in resolving interstate challenges. We take a cautious approach to country-specific issues in respect of matters of human rights, preferring rather to promote dialogue in resolving disputes, including in situations of human rights violations. The President will be co-chairing a meeting of the high-level Global Commission on the Future of Work at the International Labour Organization with the Prime Minister of Sweden this week. They want to send a specific message to the world that we should endeavor at all costs to keep peace in our lifetime. Destruction of life and property that has been the hallmark of human interaction at odds with each other does not define us and should not define our time. For, against all provocation, at the height of our struggle in South Africa, we chose peace and will use every resource and every space available to us to preach peace. Chairperson, I now turn to the matters of the department. Honorable members in the Portfolio Committee have raised issues with me about their concerns and with the department as well. My department operates within an ever-changing environment and compels us to be responsive to that. And because of the cost containment measures, the organizational structure is a key mechanism that we need to target and concentrate on and restructure. I have recently interacted with the Auditor General, and I had an unfortunate interaction with him because he revealed to me that in a month's time, he will be giving us a qualified audit. This will be the first time in the history of the Department of DIRCO. It will be the first time in my lifetime. And I have vowed that it will not happen while I live. I therefore want to ask members of the committee, please to give me 3 months to sort the matters that the Auditor General has brought to my attention so that we avoid a qualified audit. The Auditor General's findings range from lack of proper oversight over the bidding processes to what he thinks is abuse of resources, and it goes on, and the list is long. He goes on to quote the fact that in the department we seem to act with impunity and there are no repercussions for anything that we do wrong. Our international work is based on a strong administration, and I believe that we can get this, and we can put this structure right and get the department at a different level. We have asked our heads of mission to come down so that we can have a meeting with them between the 2nd and the 5th of June, and we'll inform them how we're restructuring the department to be responsive to the concerns both of the Portfolio Committee and the Auditor General. We also want to show our heads of mission that we are responsive to them. Our diplomats need to feel that this transformation that we're about to undertake, that they have been yearning for time, puts them at the center of everything that we do. And every diplomat wants to know that their position is important to the department. After we've met the Auditor General's timeframes, I'm hoping that I'll be back to the Portfolio Committee to share with them my views on how we need to restructure to do what we need to do and to right the wrongs that have been pointed out to me. I've had opportunity also to interact with the department at the level of the DDGs, both myself with the president and on my own. And I have encountered a situation where those people who regard themselves as career diplomats feel overlooked every time there is a posting abroad. I want to say to them, if they're listening, that we have a posting in June, and this will be dedicated in good faith to them alone. So we're posting only our career diplomats in June to make sure that they feel included in the work they do, to make sure that we take them on board and they are catered for in their concerns. The December posting, of course, will be the prerogative of the president. In conclusion, we meet in the month of May that has been designated as Africa Month. It is this month in 1963 when the Organization of African Unity was born on the 25th of May. On that occasion, African countries came together to craft a strategy for the liberation of Africa. This month resonates with a deep-seated quest to bring to the fore issues that still plague Africa. I wish to remind you of the advice that Haile Selassie gave in his address to the inaugural conference of the OAU in 1963, and I quote in closing, "If we permit ourselves to be tempted by narrow self-interest and vain ambition, if we butter our beliefs for short-term advantage, who will listen when we claim to speak for conscience?" Close quotes. We stand for conscience in this country. We stand for conscience in the Department of International Relations, and we want to be recognized for that. I thank you.
Sithokoze mhlonishwa Ngqongqoshe. Kwanje sizobiza uchairperson we-committee, umhlonishwa Masango, uchubekisa inkulumo mpikiswano.
Ngilinganise nabantu mphathini ram. Honorable House Chair, Honorable Minister Sisulu, Honorable Deputy Ministers Lenders and Mhaule respectively, Honorable members, distinguished guests in the gallery, fellow South Africans, it is instructive to recall that on the 9th of May 1994, right here in this People's Parliament, our mother, ANC stalwart and stoic freedom fighter, Nontsigelelo Albertina Sisulu, nominated Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela as President of South Africa, and Mandela was inaugurated on the 10th May 1994 as President. The ANC has dedicated 2018 as the year to celebrate the indelible contributions of both Nelson Mandela and Albertina Sisulu, both of whom were born in 1918. We shall forever cherish the fond memories of both Sisulu and Nelson Mandela, who pursued relentlessly the principal objectives of the Freedom Charter, that the people shall govern. Unwele oluto khamela, unwele olute naguwe matiba. Sitigini inahayona, sisapala nayo impuralana, ezatlakisa machegu. Lest we forget the terrible crime of apartheid, which was exposed to the international community by the likes of Peter Makubane, Alan Patton, and the veteran photojournalist Sam Zimmer, who captured the picture of Hector Peterson after being shot dead during the 1976 Soweto youth uprisings. Our condolences to the Nzima family, and may his revolutionary soul rest in perfect peace. The ANC supports the budget of this department because it continues to deepen the seminal internationalist tradition so deftly crafted and so tirelessly worked hard for by President O.R. Tambo. Honorable Chair, South Africa's progressive internationalism on the international political firmament and our role through this department in the United Nations, the AU, the PAP, the BRICS, the G20, the G77 and others are widely recognized. We are truly an active global citizen. Over the last 24 years, we have contributed through this department in no small measure in the peacekeeping and mediation efforts, as well as the observance of human rights and good governance initiatives in the continent and the world. Honorable members, the ANC fully supports, Honorable Minister, I wanted to say, the ANC fully supports your stated intention to reimagine, recalibrate, and reboot South Africa's influence in Africa and the world through Pan-Africanism and the African Renaissance. As a nation, we don't want to be a passive political passenger on the global stage whilst human civilization evolves. Our missions abroad are in full patriotic service of our national interest and Agenda 2063. To realize your vision, Honorable Minister, there are institutions and outstanding South African thought leaders who can be your resource for instance, the South African Council on International Relations, SAQUIA, the Institute of Global Dialogue, IGD, and the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, also known as ACCORD. And Mr. Khalima Motlante, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, Mr. Max Sisulu, Mr. Paulo Jordan, Dr. Eddie Maluka, Dr. Sidney Mfumadi, and Ms. Sanusha Naidu, to mention just but a few. All of us who are serving South Africa in the international, continental, and domestic front should support President Ramaphosa's clarion call articulated in the SONA 2018 of Tumamina. Recently, our president emphasized the importance of investment into South Africa, and accordingly, we need to deploy more trade attachés, economic diplomats in strategic countries, and create an aggressive Pan-African trade negotiating team in the World Trade Organization to offset the continuous trade deficit against Africa. We need to increase the intra-African trade. The intra-African trade is essential as an important driver of development and regional integration in Africa, as is the case with the other regions of the world like the European Union and Asia. We welcome the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which was launched in March 2018, Kigali in Rwanda. Honorable Chairperson, Western Sahara remains one of the last bastions of colonialism on the continent, and our parliament calls on Morocco to end its illegal occupation. The Sahrawi people rightfully demand self-determination and national sovereignty like all other nations of the world. The recent admission of Morocco to the AU must not diminish this goal. With regard to Palestine, history will once again prove that the ANC is on the right march of history in calling for a peaceful coexistence between Palestine and Israel. Today, the 15th May 2018, our parliament stands in unwavering solidarity with the Palestinians who are commemorating the 70th anniversary of the Nakba. The Nakba refers to the ethnic cleansing after the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. Today, there are approximately 4.5 million Palestinians living in exile. It was reported yesterday that over 50 people have been killed and 2,700 maimed and injured for participating in a peaceful protest march of the opening of the US Embassy in Jerusalem. Now, the right to march is a normal civic and political activity in the whole civilized world. For the record, this parliament is neither anti-US nor anti-Israel, but simply calls for peaceful coexistence amongst all nations. It is thus incumbent upon the international community to recognize the plight of Palestinians and call upon Israel to comply with international law and conventions, including the UN General Assembly Resolution 194 of 1948, the 1951 Geneva Convention, which relates to the status of refugees. Our parliament calls for the cessation of hostilities and a resumption of negotiations to find a durable solution. Honorable Chairperson, as always, our parliament calls upon the USA to hand over the Guantanamo Bay back to Cuba, lift its trade embargo, and not reverse the diplomatic entente started by President Raul Castro and President Barack Obama. It is in our recent discussions with the department, it was reported that South Africa's foreign policy is implemented within a highly dynamic and challenging global environment that is often volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. This is evidenced by the recent US withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, which will affect our MTN operations in Iran. In addition to the incessant war in Syria, there are many other troubled and muddied political waters, as in the DRC, Burundi, Central African Republic, South Sudan, and the terrorist machinations of the Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram. The committee noted that the foreign currency fluctuations always shortchange the budget of this department, Minister, which is 6,552 in 2018-2019 financial year. We welcome the hosting of the upcoming BRICS and IORA summits in South Africa this year, as they deepen the developmental, economic, and trade initiatives within the South-South nation states. Honorable Minister, in our interaction with the department, we noted that, one, the ICT infrastructure and asset management in the missions abroad still needs attention. Two, the committee recommends that the department reduces the leasing of property abroad by building its own chancelleries. Three, the committee further recommends that all consequence management cases be finalized. Lastly, as a new minister, we advise that you look at the expeditious migration from the African Renaissance to the South African Development Partnership Agency. The committee has finalized all the stakeholder consultations regarding the Foreign Service Bill, including undertaking a study tour to Canada in September 2017. Hopefully, This bill will be tabled for debate in the National Assembly in August this year. Mphathi Nrambo, angiswaphelisa ikulumo ngokuthokoza ungqongqotshe nabasekeli ngqongqotshe bakhe begodi nengikhulu zomnyango wezechebiswano nenarha zangaphandle. Ngingakhohlwa njani amalunga ahloniphekile kunye nababeregi bekomiti lena lapha eParliament. Umbutho wabantu uyasisekela lesi sabelo semali sango 2018-2019. Uzimo achudubazi Afrika inarha ilale inhliziyo zipharumelana ngiyathokoza.
Sithokoze Dumako. Sibuyise silatelang ke motlhomphegi Mokgalapa wa DA.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Minister, guests, I would like to begin this afternoon by conveying our deepest condolences to the families of the protesters killed in Gaza yesterday. The DA condemns the violence in the strongest terms. We join with the rest of the world in calling for the peace to be restored. We reiterate our commitment to the two-state solution and ask that the parties commit themselves to finding a peaceful resolution through dialogue. Chairperson, this year marks the 70th celebration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also this month is the 55th anniversary of the formation of the OAU. Yet what should be a time of celebration has been interrupted by the shift in world politics. Global politics today have been reduced to a zero-sum game driven by racial, nationalist, and populist movements that are domestically focused. Increasingly, the focus of states is inwards turning, with an emphasis on the sometimes real and perceived threats of immigration, global security, extremism, and terrorism. This narrow focus is steadily degrading multilateral institutions like the United Nations Security Council. Responding to the current changes, South Africa needs to vigorously and purposefully define its own national interest through a well-crafted economic diplomacy. This task requires a professional and skilled diplomatic corps committed to pursuing the nation's interest and capable of finding the balance between pursuing economic diplomacy and promoting human rights. The current deficit in global leadership offers South Africa an opportunity to occupy that space with bold and principled leadership. Chairperson, allow me to address the Minister, and I'm glad, Minister, that you've met with the Auditor General, the legacy of this department. This department had 3 conservative qualified audit opinions with a recurrent emphasis on issues including ICT, irregular tenders, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, lack of requisite skills, and lack of leadership. We hope you bring a fresh approach to the challenges facing your department. You must act swiftly to restore the institutional integrity of this department. Every program in your department requires not only your attention, but also your willingness to act decisively. Let me mention a few. DCOS administration requires immediate action to address the ill discipline, nepotism, corruption, and victimization as highlighted by Nehawu. Many disciplinary cases are not finalized. There is a skills deficit and a dire lack of both consequence and performance management. I challenge you to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the disciplinary case against the Chief Financial Officer, which has now been dragging for more than 2 years. You must act swiftly on this matter if you are to restore the institutional dignity of this department. Program 2 is the main cost driver of the department. Over 2.2 billion will be spent on this program due to staff cost, property lease cost, foreign allowances, and foreign currency fluctuations. The NDP and National Treasury have called on the department for rationalization of our foreign service. This can be done by committing to a thorough analysis of the political and economic cost versus the benefit of our missions. cadre deployment and the dumping of failed ANC politicians have compromised the quality and image of our diplomatic corps and of brand South Africa. Instead, we need a professional, well-trained and resourced diplomats if we are to address the domestic imperatives of poverty, unemployment and inequality through effective economic diplomacy.
Don't drown the speaker.
To this end, Minister, we welcome the introduction of the Foreign Service Bill in order to regulate our foreign service, and we welcome your move about the career diplomats. South Africa needs to ensure that our participation in multilateral forums is to advance our constitutional principles and values, and that we are once again seen by the international community to be the custodian of human rights and democracy. Currently, our voting patterns in the United Nations, in the Security Council, and the Human Rights Council are shocking and embarrassing in contrast to our values. Minister, why do we vote with China against the victims of human rights abuses in Syria? These are some of the examples. Our current chairpersonship of SADC and our leadership role in the AU should be to ensure regional and continental integration and development through democracy, rule of law, and good governance. Instead, we protect dictators, rogue states, and autocratic leaders like the DRC's Kabila, the Sudan's Omar al-Bashir, and the Burundi's Nkurunziza, who, as we speak, is forging ahead with an ill-advised referendum to stay on power. We need to call for the strengthening of democracy, for the will of the people to be respected, and for the free and fair elections in the DRC on the terms set out in the Catholic Peace Accord. We must stand for the respect for constitutional and international law. The NDP envisions that South Africa will take up its leadership role in the advancement of development in Africa. To that end, it prioritized the tripartite free trade agreement and SADC regional integration. Trade is essential to the development of Africa, and the African continental free trade area is long overdue. Agenda 2063 will only be achieved through good economic and political governance. South Africa must do more than regularly attend multilateral forums. We must strive to occupy strategic positions in these forums through candidacy diplomacy and asserting our influence to ensure that resolutions adopted align with our constitutional values. We must ensure that our consular service are extended to protect our citizens. In conclusion, Chair, the Democratic Alliance foreign policy is focused on 3 pillars of constitutionalism, economic diplomacy, and human rights. It is a foreign policy that is driven by principles and values. It is a foreign policy that is patriotic and inclusive, serving the interest of all South Africans. The DA's foreign policy will focus on attracting FDI in order to create jobs and prioritize regional trade. We stand for South African foreign policy that respects international law and its institutions in a rules-based world order aimed at achieving a global community characterized by freedom, fairness, and opportunity for all. I thank you.
Ra leboga Rre Mokgalapa. Sebui se se latelang ke Mohlomphegi Mashabela wa EFF.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. We must, from the onset, state our anger and disgust at the murderous actions of the apartheid state of Israel, aided by the equally murderous government of the United States of America. In the light of the killings of the people of Palestine yesterday by the evil Israel regime, we must take a firm stand as this parliament and the country to register our disgust at the continued killings of Palestinian people by these criminals. It is not enough for us to recall our ambassador from Israel. We must also send the ambassador back to Israel. As the EFF, we stand in solidarity with the persecuted people of Palestine and ask them to continue their fight for the reclamation of their occupied land. In the spirit of progressive internationalism, we lend our support and ask all progressive forces in the world to fight for the liberation of Palestine. The best solidarity we can give the people of Palestine as the world is to isolate Israel. Chairperson, the crisis in the Middle East, the collapse of Libya as a result of unwarranted foreign invasion, the perpetuation of the suffering of the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the absence of a strong Pan-African voice and intervention in these cases are indication of just how misplaced our foreign policy's priorities have been. We have lost both our moral voice, our strategic influence role in the continent, which would enable us to provide leadership on matters of Pan-African interest. It is not in our interest that we do not have a properly functioning government in the Congo. It is not in our interest that despite the wealth in resources of this continent, the African Union continues to depend on foreign aid to function. It is not in our interest to maintain unequal trade relations with countries who seek to bully us to support their weak international agenda. But with a weak thinking of our foreign policy imperatives as we have now, we are bound to go to whichever direction the wind goes to, with no due regard for our national interest. For this reason, we ought to stop fighting while Africa is burning. We need to stop playing around vague terms such as Agenda 2063, sponsored by Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. The only radical plan for African integration and development remains the Abuja Treaty, which had clear economic and political goals for integrating Africa's development to ensure that Africa benefits from the wealth of its natural resources and that there is a deeper entrenchment of freedoms across the continent.
Honorable member knows very well that Honorable Nkosazana Zuma is a member of this committee, of this house. She must address her accordingly.
Okay. That's Rule 85.
Okay.
Can we do that, Honorable Member?
Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma.
Thank you, Ma.
Are you okay now? Let us agitate for a unified Africa. As Kwame Nkrumah once said, Africa must unite or perish. We must start by giving the Pan-African Parliament proper legislative framework. But we are aware that it is not possible to do so while Pan-African Parliament is led by a corrupt leader who does not want to account. We reject this budget. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Raleboga. Isikhulumi esilandelayo umhlonishwa wahlengwa we-IFP. Order, order, honorable members. Order. Continue, Honorable Hlengwa.
No, thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson, Honorable Minister Khamela and your deputies. At the outset, the IFP would like to wish you well in your new responsibilities and hope that you will execute them to the best of your ability. South Africa has increasingly become an integral part of the global agenda through participation in numerous forums, exerting pressure and influence wherever we could, pursuing trade, justice, freedom, peace, and global social cohesion to advance our domestic interests and the African agenda. Along the way, we have had some serious and grave mistakes, but also achieved significant successes. We in South Africa understand the burden of oppression, having had to bear the brutality of colonialism and apartheid for over 300 years. What we went through, we do not wish on anybody anywhere in the world. And justly so, whenever the violations of human rights manifest or where a people are denied their universal suffrage, we in South Africa must stand on the side of the people and not the side of the oppressor. In this regard, Chairperson, I rise today in solidarity with the oppressed people of the world and importantly challenge the South African government to not sacrifice human rights and social justice at the altar of trade expediency. The opportunity cost of our international diplomacy, friendship, and comradeship cannot be the oppression of people. I rise today in solidarity with the people of Tibet and Taiwan who are at the receiving end of Chinese intimidation and oppression through the illegitimate one China policy. The absence of democracy in China grinds against the grain of the core tenets of our Constitution, which must be the yardstick measure of our global cooperation. We can never proclaim freedom in its wholesomeness here at home when we actively cozy up to those who perpetuate oppression elsewhere in the world. The instability and the absence of lasting peace in the Middle East is of grave concern, and we must not escalate tensions with antagonistic policies. We must be a nation of solutions and not a nation of problems. Without condoning the violence that we witnessed yesterday, Honorable Minister, we believe that the calls to downgrade the South African mission in Israel is regrettable. Rather, we must more aggressively advocate for the realization of the two-state solution wherein Israel and Palestine live in peace side by side. Equally, our pending withdrawal from the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court is myopic and selfish in the face of gross human rights violations around the world. The people of Sudan, for example, deserve our solidarity. Our solidarity should not be with Omar al-Bashir. We dare not stand on the side of those who repeat the actions of those who oppressed us. We must seek to give the African Union teeth to bite and ensure that its decisions are binding and build up the capabilities of the Pan-African Parliament towards legislative powers and functions. In the same spirit, we must continue exerting pressure on the United Nations to reform its structures, including the Security Council, to reflect the world of today and not that of 1945. As the world changes, whether through Brexit or the revised United Nations inward-looking agenda, or through the progress we are witnessing in the Korean Peninsula, or the increase of leadership and government changes on the continent, South Africa must carefully identify its strengths and opportunities in these changes and exploit them constructively to take this country and the world forward. Chairperson, the pragmatic diplomacy approach guided by our Constitution and national interest will enable South Africa to capitalize on the promises of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And fundamentally, we must use our international relations as a jobs driver, particularly for young people. We must work with our global partners to grow our economy and create jobs for South Africans here at home and abroad. Ultimately, Chairperson, our international relations, cooperation and global diplomacy must not be history-centered, but must be more future-driven. The IFP supports this budget vote. I thank you.
Thokoze. The next speaker is Honorable Shaikh Imam of the NFP.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair.
Point of order, Slalo.
The National Freedom Party
Point of
welcomes
order.
Point of order, ma.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Anganoma kuvumelekile ukuthi njoba sila sizosebenza la. Kodwa umhlonishwa oyena ophethe la eParliament uJackson, Honorable Jackson Mthembu udlala igame la phakathi kusho ukuthi kusasa uzodlala amaphepha
Thokoze, ma.
ngiyabonga
Angibizi njenge point of order leyo ngiyayichitha. Oh, there's no. The other issue, before you start, Honorable Imam, can we have the translation services working? Can we have them working? Service people, can you assist us? I've been told that the translation is not taking place. Continue, Honorable Shaikh
Thank you,
Imam.
House Chair. Allow me to welcome your intervention, Honorable Minister, in terms of the challenges that the department are facing, and I'm quite certain that with your intervention, the department will perform much better in the years to come. Now, Honorable Chairperson or Minister, one of the challenges we have is our role that we play in regions like SADC and Pan-African Parliament. I must admit that very little is achieved, particularly in the SADC region. As members of Parliament, we go there, we live in five-star hotels, and I must add there's very little or nothing happens. And I think it calls for your intervention to see that it can be more meaningful. And I think the other day at the Pan-African Parliament, the sentiments appear to be the same thing. Honorable Chairperson, allow me to condemn with the contempt it deserves the brutal slaying of over 59 Palestinians by the Israelis, including an 8-month-old baby. Now, Honorable Chairperson, according to Doctors Without Borders, the exit wounds are as big as the size of a fist, and the bones of more than half the people that came to hospital were pulverized into dust. That is the scale of atrocities that the people of Palestine are facing by the apartheid Israel. I want to add that apartheid Israel is no different to the apartheid South Africa pre-94. That's exactly what our people went through in any event, Honorable Chairperson. Now, Honorable Chairperson, allow me to congratulate the government of ANC for withdrawing our ambassador to Israel. It is indeed commendable that you have taken such a decision. Honorable Chairperson, allow me to also say that the African National Congress Conference in December 2017 resolved for an immediate and unconditional downgrading of the South African Embassy in Israel to a liaison office. Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, Chairperson Mazango, all of you were there. Over 75 of you that spoke unanimously agreed that we will downgrade it in.
Honorable Imam, Sheikh Honorable Sheikh, please wait. What point of order are you raising on, Honorable Member?
Ngibona sathi khona imistake eyenzekile la ephepheni. La besithi thina kubizwa ilunga le-NFP.
Honorable Member, that's
Manje
not a
sabona
point of
le-ANC
order.
angazi imistake right.
Take your seat, it's not a point of order. Continue, Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Honorable Chairperson, as the National Freedom Party, in light of your resolution, we are saying we want an immediate and unconditional downgrading of the South African Embassy in Israel to a liaison office. We are also calling for an expulsion of the Israeli ambassador to South Africa. We are also calling for us to stop the importation of all Israeli products, and further calls to prevent any Israel companies doing business in South Africa until the issue of the Palestinians are resolved in terms of the two-state solution. Let us not forget about that. Now, let me also remind you, Honorable Chairperson, let me quote what our former icon Madiba once said. We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Apartheid was wrong in South Africa, and it is wrong in Palestine.
Honorable Sheikh Imam,
Free Palestine.
Your time is up.
Now, Honorable
Your time
Chairperson.
is up, Honorable Sheikh.
Sorry?
Your time is up.
Yo, 4 minutes. There's so much more to say. The National Freedom Party supports the BRR report tabled here today.
Thank you. Order. Order, honorable members. Order. Can we continue, honorable members? The next speaker is the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable Londas from the ANC.
Honorable House Chairperson, it is an honor for me to address you on this important occasion which takes place during Africa Month.
Point of order, Chair.
Me Sonti, Rekali Tusa.
Yebo ma o ka nthusa. Ke kopa go botsa mama gore bathi kene cross floor floor crossing iphelile yaphela.
Oh, hayi sizokufunela ama documents ayiqedisa mama hlala phansi.
Asikhulume ngaphandle. Ngiyacela mama noba ngoba yaphela mayibuye sifuna utata across sham.
Thank you very much.
Across.
Mara umosha isikhathi somhlonishwa akangeni.
Ngiyabonga.
Qhubeka Deputy Minister.
Honorable House Chairperson, 2018 is an auspicious year. On 25 May, we commemorate the establishment of the OAU, which is now the African Union. This year, we also celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the milestone document in the history of human rights. This declaration sets out fundamental human rights to be universally protected. Sadly, whilst we are celebrating this document, there are numerous countries who continue to violate the human rights of their citizens. In 2018, South Africa assumed the chair of the Southern African Development Community, or SADC. We will continue to focus on building our political and economic integration of SADC states. We will continue to strengthen peace, security, democracy, and development. South Africa's membership of and role within international organizations that include IPSA, BRICS, and IORA, which comprise an integral component of securing South Africa's policy objectives. They serve as a force multiplier in positively influencing the global economic and governance structures. They place people at the center of the global developmental agenda and focus on addressing the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. South Africa assumed the chairship of BRICS on 1 January 2018 and will conclude this role on 31 December 2018. As such, the 10th BRICS Summit will be chaired by His Excellency President Ramaphosa from 25 to 27 July 2018 in Gauteng under the theme, and I quote, BRICS in Africa, Collaboration for Inclusive Growth and Shared Prosperity in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, close quote. South Africa's approach to its chairship is grounded in the intention to ensure programmatic continuity for BRICS and is committed to executing approximately 100 sectoral meetings reflective of the expanded BRICS architecture. It also intends to bring a specific focus to the challenges and opportunities presented by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Furthermore, cognizant of our national interests and priorities, South Africa will once again seek to highlight the African agenda during its chairship. In October 2017, South Africa assumed the chair of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, or IORA, and will continue to do so until October 2019. Thus, we have been honored to lead this preeminent regional body linking Africa, the Middle East, and Australasia via the Indian Ocean. Importantly, it is our intention to create and enhance the institutional mechanisms necessary to advance important priorities for South Africa and the region, such as women's economic empowerment, maritime safety and security, the blue economy or oceans economy, and tourism. Honorable House Chair, mindful of the significance of 2018, we will renew our commitment to the struggle against subjugation and deprivation of our fellow Africans, particularly the people of Western Sahara. Our continent cannot be free whilst these fellow brothers and sisters continue to yearn for their freedom and self-determination. It was anticipated that the readmission of Morocco into the AU would expedite the resolution of this dispute. On the contrary, the Moroccans are utilizing their membership to undermine the people of Western Sahara by denying them a referendum to determine whether they are in favor of self-determination in keeping with innumerable UN resolutions. To this end, we will continue to lobby all AU members and the broader international community to expedite the resolution of the Sahrawi question. Honorable members, at the AU High-Level Committee meeting held on Libya in April this year, a report was received from the UN Secretary General's representative to Libya. It was reported, amongst other things, that there are at least 20 million illegal weapons and firearms in Libya that contribute to the ongoing conflict in that country. It was disturbing to receive the report that a sea vessel had been detained in Greece carrying a cargo of weapons destined for Libya. This incident is evidence that outside forces that have absolutely no interest in seeing a peaceful, prosperous, democratic Libya emerge from the ashes of a devastating war, are determined to prolong the suffering of the Libyan people. As members of the EU, it is our responsibility to expose and stop these forces who undermine our approach and belief of dealing with conflict through multilateralism. Honorable members, this year also marks the 30th anniversary of the Battle of Quito Carnival, which was a turning point in the struggle to free the continent and our own country from the colonialism that is called apartheid. What comes to mind when we recall this battle are the sacrifices of the Cuban Revolutionary Army for officers and commanders who fought alongside African liberation movements and people for our cause and our freedom. Madiba himself confessed that, and I quote, "The Cuban people hold a special place in the hearts of the people of Africa. The Cuban internationalists have made a contribution to African independence, freedom, and justice, unparalleled for its principles and selfless character." Ladies and gentlemen, the 2012 Health Cooperation Agreement with Cuba has reached its conclusion. Engagements are underway towards the renewal of that agreement. Given our continued revolutionary friendship with the people of Cuba, we wish to reaffirm our solidarity with her people and call for an immediate end to the economic blockade by the United States. Honorable members, we will continue to explore more cooperation opportunities, particularly increasing our bilateral trade with Mercosur states under the Preferential Trade Agreement, or PTA, of 2016. These endeavors will be complementary to our ongoing beneficial trade relations with countries of the North, such as the United States and Canada. Irrespective of the recent tariff regime announcement, we are confident that the principles of rule-based free trade multilateralism will still prevail. Equally, whilst we remain committed to strengthening our trade relations with the US, we will not be intimidated and bullied by the recent threats of the US to cut their aid to countries who vote against them at multilateral institutions. We remain committed to an independent and principled approach to foreign policy. Honorable House Chair, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 25th anniversary of the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action. At the recently concluded high-level segment session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, we reiterated the call for the Council to take a balanced approach to human rights. We called for the observance of the Vienna spirit of indivisibility, interdependence, and interrelatedness of all human rights. We advocated and will continue to advocate for the adherence to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or NPT, in order to guarantee the right to life and people's well-being in the world. As such, nuclear weapon states must honor their undertaking to eliminate nuclear weapons rather than to create justifications for exploring further options in this regard.
Wrap up in a minute.
Honorable members, in conclusion, 2018 marks the centenary of the son and daughter of the African soil, the Honorable Nelson Mandela and Nontsikelelo Albertina Sisulu. This budget vote attempts to pay tribute to their lifelong beliefs and principles. These priorities are underpinned by the principles of Pan-Africanism, international solidarity, human rights, and multilateralism as a means to deal with conflict and build a safer world. We will continue to build South-South solidarity whilst maintaining North-South cooperation and the strengthening of African political and economic integration, democracy, peace, and security. I thank you.
Londas, die volgende spreker is achtbare lid Wissels van die FF Plus.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. For the past 2 decades, South Africa's foreign policy has to a large extent been directionless and solely based on the ANC's historic loyalty, rather than the current realities. The government's foreign policy is not consequential. Whilst South Africa withdraws very, very quickly its ambassador from Israel, the Dalai Lama has been refused entry into South Africa on 3 occasions since 2009. As many as 430,000 Tibetans has been killed by the Chinese, but nothing is said about that. The minister says South Africa's foreign policy is based on human rights and the freedom of oppression. Yet the South African government does not condemn Venezuelan President Maduro for overseeing one of the worst human rights crises in our time because of historic loyalty. The same with regards to the misplaced loyalty towards al-Bashir. Also, the oppression of the freedom of speech by President Putin and the Chinese President Jinping are tolerated because of historic loyalty. Do we have a foreign policy? We need sound foreign policy and a streamlined foreign mission system to restore South Africa's credibility that has been, Honourable Minister, destroyed by your predecessor and by our former president. The loyalty towards BRICS and the misplaced loyalty towards Russia and China with no positive trade balance has significantly damaged our foreign credibility, and that needs to be addressed. It is welcomed, Honourable Minister, that you are saying that you will address the financial mismanagement of your department. The amount of irregular expenditure, the amount of fruitless and wasteful expenditure is shocking and should be addressed urgently. The number of our missions increase, yet there is no strategic goal, and that is what is needed. There should be better coordination also between departments to, at the end of the day, get positive trade balance. We cannot only get trade relations going based on what the ANC's historic loyalty is, rather than what is in the best interest of the people of South Africa. Address that and go back to what is actually needed. The honourable member should learn from other countries. She should go and look what happened in Venezuela when property rights were lost. She should go and look at other countries. You can have the land, but you won't have the land. Government will have the land, and you will also not have any property rights. You will lose your property rights, and the same thing will happen. Chairperson, we need to address the imbalances that we are facing currently with regards to our foreign policy. We need to get back to what is in the best interest of South Africa and not what is in the best interest of historic loyalty. The loyalty towards Cuba, the complete disregard for the actual facts with regards to, for instance, healthcare, where we send hundreds and thousands of students to Cuba, and they then cannot practice in South Africa because they are not actually trained, is an example.
Honourable
of
Vessel, your time has
misplaced
expired.
and misguided loyalty.
Your time has expired, Honourable Member.
The number of missions and address foreign policy to get it in line to bring the best to South Africa and its people.
Point of order, Chairperson. Point of
Thank you
order.
very much. Yes, Honourable Member.
Yes, left. But he's factually misleading the House that the Cuban doctors are not practicing in South Africa.
Okay, thank you, Honourable Member. I now call upon Honourable Raputi.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Lindiwe Sisulu, let me congratulate you for being appointed as the International Relations Minister. and also the Deputy Minister, Makabo Regina Mahaule. You are welcome in this committee. And honorable members,
Point of order, Slan.
fellow South Africans,
Point of order, Slan.
Honorable Raputi, can you stop a little bit? Yes, Honorable Kaula, what's the point of order?
Mina ngenza sure ukuthi sibongo somuntu ngisibiza kahle.
Thank you.
Angathi mangibingelela ngibingelela ngokungishandeza. Akathi Makhawula shono.
Thank you, Makaula. That's not a point of order. You may continue, Honorable Raputi.
fellow South African, the ANC support this budget vote. To the people of South Africa and the world at large, the African National Congress is proudly saying they are invigorated, renewed, and it will continue to serve the people of South Africa. The African National Congress came back from its National Congress 5 months ago in Nasrec, where from there it was resolved that it could continue to build a better Africa and contribute to the better world. A better South Africa is about ensuring a better partnership and working relationship of the African Union, the Pan-African Parliament, the new Partnership of African Development, and the African Development Bank. Chairperson, South Africa in the National Development Plan is envisioned as a globally competitive economy and influence leader of the international community. But the Global Competitive Report at the World Economic Forum rank most of the African countries very high in corruption. We need to rectify this. As corruption brings instability, conflicts, disruptions, and unstable labor markets. His Excellency, the President Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, dedicated this year, 2018, to two icons of the ANC and South Africa. The two icons are Mama Nontsikelelo, Albertina Sisulu, and Tate Kgolitlatla Nelson Mandela. These two heroes were selfless social activists who endlessly encouraged the youth to dedicate themselves to a better Africa and contribute towards a transforming Africa. Let us draw lessons from them with the contribution they made, with humane, professional attributes they displayed at all times. Let me take this opportunity to urge the African nation to support Africa to get a permanent seat at the United Security Council. South Africa's role in Africa is to strengthen the African agenda by advocating and supporting organizational reforms of the African Union in order to realize Agenda 2063, which seeks to chart a trajectory for Africa towards self-determination, freedom, progress, and collective prosperity. Chapter 7 of the National Development Plan emphasizes the importance of regional integration, especially the South African Development Community. Chairperson, let me be known that South African must be mindful of the various engagements that will be taking place during 2018, which is to further discuss and resolve to realize the importance of the regional integration that will play a pivotal role to consummate the relation of the region. Chairperson, fellow South Africans, building an Africa we want, the African Continental Free Trade Area was launched in March 2018, whereby African nations committed to cut tariffs to 90% of goods with the aim of increasing inter-Africa trade. This has created the largest free trade zones since the creation of the World Trade Organization. South Africa has signed the declaration, but not yet ratified. We are urging South African government and parliament to speed up the ratification of the important institution. Chairperson, let me take this opportunity to wish the following countries well in the upcoming election: Zimbabwe, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Madagascar. In addition, Honorable Chairperson, His Excellency, the President Ramaphosa, confirmed in his 28th State of the Nation address, where he emphasized the impetus of solidarity South Africa should have with the people of Western Sahara towards a peaceful referendum which could enable them to carve their destiny. Chairperson, let me further encourage the youth to take heed to the opportunities in building a better South Africa and Africa in participating in the international arena. In the spirit of Tumamina, South African, let us think globally and act locally to tap into opportunities that are in store for us, especially for women and youth. Tumamina, to be a peacemaker. Tumamina, to be part of commitment made by the African Union on the roadmap, on the practical step in silencing the guns in Africa 2020. Tumamina, to be part of building a better South Africa, and Africa for peace, security, stability, for sustainable economic development on the continent. Tumamina, so that we should not bring junks in this parliament. People must vote properly in order that they must not bring people to come and howl here in the house. So ANC support this vote. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Raputi. Honorable Dudley. Okay, honorable members, can we give Honorable Dudley
Thank you.
a chance?
Honorable
to
Minister,
present yourself?
Honorable Deputy Ministers. The ACDP welcomes the budget, as I'm sure you do, but we realize that foreign exchange fluctuations and unplanned activities will more than likely eat into it. We also note the Minister's commitment and promises with regard to audit challenges, and we welcome that. Now, the ACDP takes this moment to reflect on the National Development Plan, which states that the country's foreign policy should be shaped by the interplay between diplomatic, political, security, environmental, economic, and regional dynamics that define international relations. And this must, of course, take place while global trends increasingly influence the way countries of the world relate to each other, and information and communications technology go above and beyond sovereignty, international boundaries, and regulatory systems. The accelerated massive flow of information on ideology, ideas, and capital across the world make it impossible to expect international relations to be managed as they have been through the ages and even in recent times. Continuous pressure is put on South Africa to take sides in many conflicts. Government is, we know, aware that all countries have their strengths and weaknesses, and while we send peace missions and peacekeeping forces where needed, we respect the sovereignty of these countries. Erring on the side of tolerance in the hope of influencing them regarding a culture of human rights while providing practical assistance and encouragement with regard to good governance and democracy. Now, personally, I've saluted South Africa's cautious position regarding forced regime change and democracy by force, which we know delivers certain death and destruction. What we also know for sure is that negotiations are going to be necessary one way or another, as all wars end up with negotiated settlements. Surely it makes sense to support peace and negotiations and to stay committed to this regardless of the frustrations. Politics does, however, complicate matters, and even the best policies can be overridden by agendas influencing majority opinion. Minister Pandor's statement during the State of the Nation address, that majority party had agreed that government must cut diplomatic ties with Israel. President Ramaphosa following this by saying that diplomatic ties with Israel were to be downsized. And now the withdrawal of our ambassador to Israel are an example of this kind of pressure. The ACDP would like to encourage government that despite the pressure, they know the right thing to do is to remain committed to meaningful and positive engagement with all stakeholders in the Middle East, and to reconsider the value of resuscitating and empowering Middle East envoys, which we believe would do far more to move parties toward fruitful negotiations and a sustainable peace than taking sides does. It would also be far more in character for South Africa, whose values include both culture of human rights and democracy. Pretending there are good and bad guys in this or any situation is futile. We all see what we see, and everyone must take responsibility for the abuses suffered by people caught up in defense measures and intifadas under the notion that jihad is a religious duty. It is shocking, however, that little children are sacrificed in these practices. The ACDP regrets, however, the loss of life, and we grieve with all the people caught up in the Middle East conflict. Hamas has been controlling Gaza
Your
since
time has
Israel.
expired,
It has.
Honourable Dudley.
So the ACDP will support all government efforts to promote peace and sustainable development within South Africa, regionally and globally. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Deputy Minister, Honourable Mahaule.
Chairperson, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, esteemed members of the Diplomatic Corps, the ECO officials, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a pleasure and an honor for me to address you on the occasion of the DECO budget vote. To fittingly and appropriately celebrate the centenary year of our founding father, President Nelson Mandela, we must recommit to fight alongside all those who are yearning for their freedom, justice, and prosperity. This is also the year where we celebrate Umama Albertina Sisulu under the theme, A Woman of Fortitude. She was undoubtedly a woman of courage and resilience who advanced women's rights throughout her adult life. We must also utilize the occasion of this centenary to re-energize the Pan-African Women's Organization. For almost 56 years, PAO has been at the forefront in mobilizing people to fight for their liberation and must remain a strong voice for women in Africa and the world. I can attest that Mayor Albertina Sisulu would have loved to ensure that this organization remains relevant and championing the cause of women at all times. In this regard, we take this opportunity to join Palestinians as they observe the Nakba Day, which signifies the beginning of a painful journey that has entered its 70th year. It was on this day, May the 15th in 1948, when the creation of the State of Israel resulted in over 700,000 Palestinians being forced out of their own territories and therefore losing their birthright. It's therefore important that when we continue to support the Palestinians in their quest for self-determination, statehood, and freedom, we impress further to Israel and its allies that their continued oppression and subjugation is unjust and a human rights violations. In this context, let us draw inspiration from Tata Madiba's instance expressed during the International Day of Solidarity with Palestinian people in Pretoria in 1997. And he said, when in 1977, the United Nations passed the resolution inaugurating the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, it was asserting the recognition and injustice and gross human rights violation were being perpetrated in Palestine, I close quote. We believe as South Africa that the two nations, Israel and Palestine, should emulate the reciprocation between the Republic of Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which we appreciate. It is our conviction that it is only through dialogue and continued engagement that will bring differences into one understanding. We will continue to express our displeasure in regard to the violation in the Middle East and call upon all parties to expedite the Middle East peace process. Our assessment is that prospects for peace and persistently shunned by the continued expansion of Israel's settlement in Palestinian territory. Furthermore, the decision of the United States of America to relocate its embassy to Jerusalem exacerbate the already protracted conflict and by extension further hindering efforts to find a peaceful solution. As witnessed what happened yesterday, as all speakers have alluded to. As you are aware, in December 2017 of the 54th National Conference of the African National Congress, a resolution was adopted to downgrade our diplomatic representation in Israel. This is a matter that is currently receiving our careful consideration following government's regulatory framework. We also would like to reiterate our deep concern about the withdrawal of the United States from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which seeks to ensure that Iran utilizes its nuclear capacities for human development as articulated by President's statement as he joined other world leaders. It is our hope that the remaining 4 signatories to JCPOA will honor their commitment, as this was endorsed by the United Nations Security Council Resolution number 2231. In a similar vein, Chairperson, we do believe that international interference and aggression will never bring about lasting peace in Syria, and in contrary, will only further contribute towards increased loss of lives and displacement. We wish to reiterate our position that the use of airstrike conducted by the countries in the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic are contrary to global governance and international law. To this end, the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria cannot be a justification for military airstrikes in a territory of a sovereign state without the authorization of the United Nations Security Council. We also condemn in strongest possible terms any possible use of chemical weapons by any party in the Syrian territory. We remain steadfast in our principled position that the issue should be resolved in the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and the Security Council of the United Nations. Chairperson, the Middle East characterizes both emerging threats and emerging opportunities. To this end, our diplomacy should promote our values and our interests from both a political and an economic approach. Thus, we attach great value to our strong economic and trade ties with countries in the region and believe that they are critical to world trade, especially in the area of energy security. This is demonstrated through the recent accelerated growth in export trade with the Gulf region. Peace and stability is required in the region so that our mission can increase their engagement with potential investors in public pursuit of the investment targets leading up to the investment summit. Chairperson, in regard to Asia, in April 2017, we have successfully launched the South Africa-China people-to-people exchange mechanism, which has further added significance to the already existing strategic relations between the two countries. In addition to the already existing government-to-government engagements, this initiative will create an opportunity for non-government entities across academia, business, and civil society to interact more frequently through organized structures. During the launch of the co-chairs witnessed the signing of 6 agreements and memoranda of understanding in various areas of cooperation. Furthermore, since October 2017, South Africa became the first African country to export beef to China. You will indeed agree with me that an indication of progress in leveraging our international agreements for domestic benefits and opening markets for our products. Chair, the Pan-African Parliament has just elected new president, vice presidents, and members of the legislature from various regions and countries, including our very own parliamentarians. It's our consideration view that efforts must be directed towards strengthening institutional capacity and accountability to enable this august body to discharge its mandate. We must expedite its transformation towards a legislative body so that the PAP can further entrench democracy, good governance, and transparency in our continent. We have a role to play to ensure that we create conditions within which our private sector can contribute to the general well-being of our people. The recent launch of the Japan-Africa Public-Private Economic Forum bears testimony for this undertaking. We will accelerate public-private partnerships and create more opportunities among Japanese and African companies. We were pleased by Japan's pledge during the launch to invest 30 billion US dollars into the continent over the next 3 years. While efforts are underway to integrate African markets, this is an opportunity to integrate Africa's economy into the global sphere. This was endorsed by President Ramaphosa during the launch when he stated, "For Africa to grow and for its people to flourish, its economies need to be more effectively integrated into the global economy." I close quote. Honorable members, we are conscious that we shall contribute to the growth of our economy, Africa's development agenda, and a better world by expanding the limited resources in our disposal. In an effort to remain within the compensation ceiling of employees as set out by the National Treasury, the department will continue with the process of rationalizing its personnel establishment at missions where it will not affect service delivery adversely. We have also frozen the filling of non-critical posts at head office and in missions abroad, and will continue to do so during the 2018-19 financial year as one of the cost curtailment measures implemented by the department. We are also doing our best to realize youth empowerment and capacity building.
Deputy
In
Minister,
essence, we have
your time has
prioritized the
expired.
implementation of internship and learnership programs since these were initiated in the public service. Honorable Chair, we have students from 4 universities that are here today who have won a competition on the BRICS Summit, and they are here with us. We need to applaud them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Congratulations to those students. I now call upon Honorable Godi.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, comrades and honorable members. Comrade Minister, congratulations on your new responsibilities. And I sincerely hope that the issues that were raised by the Auditor General, you will attend to them. They are indeed long-standing. Even in our last engagement with the department, they were there, especially issues of wastage of public money, the challenges of leadership, that is impunity, including the issues of the CFO. We even received a memo petition from the finance staff, which had also been given to management. And there were commitments that these will be attended to, but it does appear that nothing had been done. On this month, Africa Month, we are reminded and recommit to the second cause of Africa, which is striving for the establishment of the monolithic giant, the United States of Africa, peace, development, and the projection of the African personality. The APC and indeed all Africanists support a foreign policy that has Pan-African solidarity as its bedrock, looking neither west nor east, but neutral in none that affects the welfare of Africans. In fragmentation lies our neo-colonial subjugation. Conversely, Pan-Africanism builds our unity, guarantees our freedom and prosperity. The APC, Comrade Minister, wish to join humanity and indeed the majority of our people in condemning the killing of unarmed protesters in Palestine, including a wheelchair-bound protester, Fadi Abu Saleh. We support the principled and courageous decision by our government to recall our ambassador as a demonstration of our protest at what is happening in Palestine. There has been pronouncements about downgrading our representation in Israel. It will be interesting, Comrade Minister, to know what measures have been taken, are we there already, and what the process is. On this month, Africa Month, we remember the fighters for the cause of Africa, and especially our beloved leader, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, who passed away 40 years ago. We, as the living footsteps of his legacy, will keep on keeping on until his teachings of Africa for the Africans, Africans for humanity, and humanity for God becomes common cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Koti. Honorable Bergman.
Chair, I read this in, from Honourable Kalyan first. Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, congratulations on your appointment as Minister of DIRCO. I hereby tender my apology for not being able to deliver this speech in person, as I'm presently in the Pan-African Parliament. Having been at PEP since 2009, right now I have very grave feelings about the current state of affairs at PEP and question whether SA should actually be participating in the activities of PEP. The current president is largely responsible for the rot that has set in. He runs PEP like his own little fiefdom, changing the order paper at will, not being transparent about the finances, delaying presenting his annual activity reports, ignoring rules of procedure, and has told the current clerk that he will soon be fired. Furthermore, he has ignored an AU decision asking PEP to apply AU rules in managing the activities of PEP, including the principle of rotation of the President and the Bureau. SA is the largest contributor to the AU, and as the host country of PEP, spends a large amount of money on the day-to-day functioning of PEP. I hereby request that the Parliament of South Africa calls for a forensic audit into the finances of PEP as a start to clean up the rot. While President Ramaphosa only devoted 5 sentences in his SONA address to foreign policy, he stressed the importance of this ministry in regard to economic diplomacy. Critical to achieving this key priority is to have a team of ambassadors and political officers who can restore brand South Africa. 80% of SA's ambassadors are political appointees, many serving at the pleasure of the ANC because they've been loyal cadres of the movement or have reached their sell-by dates as MPs. We need a team who are capable of increasing trade incomes, tourist traffic, and the FDR. Therefore, a reform of the diplomatic service is imperative. South Africa subscribes to many continental and international bodies, but reports on what they've achieved rarely, if ever, makes its ways to Parliament. Are we getting political value in Rand value? We have to utilize the chairship of SA of SADC to pursue our foreign policy priorities. In its current form, the UN is not a true reflection of current global political and economic trends and is regarded as undemocratic and unrepresentative. We welcome the appointment of Mr. Pahad to keep SA's bid to get a seat on the UN Security Council alive and hope that our bid will be successful. South Africa's foreign policy has been through 3 phases since the end of apartheid, viz. The honeymoon phase under Nelson Mandela, the African Renaissance phase under Thabo Mbeki, and the drift period during the Zuma reign. During the Zuma presidency, there has been a lack of emphasis on human rights, resulting in some policy reversals and international embarrassments. South Africa is a society embedded in an international community. We must manage our relationship in pursuit of a just world order with particular emphasis on an unwavering commitment to preservation of human rights. In my own comments, Africa is rising, but it is no thanks to South Africa or SADC, but rather the progressive efforts of the ECOWAS region. They formed a regional parliament and are working together to increase intra-trade and form coherent and world-class steps in engaging with the global community. Unlike South Africa, who still engage in petty politics and continue to exploit the Mandela name, enforcing themselves relevant on the global stage. DIRCO for the longest time have been the stabilizer of our international ship, while our executives seem to be the perennial icebergs. Our international diplomacy record makes President Trump look like Henry Kissinger compared to us. We practice lazy diplomacy by taking our cues from lobby groups, that shout the loudest rather than engaging with countries and facts. If South Africa really wants to be taken seriously, when Africa rises and not wants to be left behind, I suggest a less antagonistic approach to Morocco and the Middle East, and rather a more diplomatic approach. Let us put South Africa back on the map as credible peace brokers that seek just resolve in a consistent approach. Through relooking our projects, our missions, and our peacekeeping efforts, we could have a positive impact on our budget and in turn use the money more wisely to increase the efficiencies and deliver within our own country. And let me leave you with these words. Those who spend their time looking for faults in others have no time left for correcting their own. Like you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bachman. Honorable Kenya. Honorable Kenya.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable members of this August House, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, ANC supports the budget vote for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Firstly, I must just respond on Honorable Bergman on the issue of the reduction of the missions abroad. It is important for South Africa to maintain physical presence in missions abroad. The problem is not the numbers. What is important is the outreach and the country to have maximum benefit out of bilateral relations. There is a need for more missions abroad for political and economic reasons so as to be able to fight the triple challenges. Honorable Mokhalapa, you talked about the disciplinary case against CFO. I don't know, even last week, the department explained to us that they are addressing the issue, and once the disciplinary processes have been completed, the committee will get full response in writing, yes, of course. Honorable Mashapelo, I'm worried when we are always rejecting the budgets, because it is important that we notice how are we doing to make our work if the budget, we don't look at the budget. Because if you reject, it means that now our international relations department will have a problem. When we say they must go and work, in spite of that, we know that their budget has been reduced. Now, how do we think that if you are rejecting, they are going to manage to do the work abroad? Honorable Westphal, unfortunately, he's not here now, but I just want, just in passing, to tell him that we know the Cuban doctors have been here, and as ukhulele pike yena, oko sinazo Cuban doctors up, especially that I'm a nurse by profession. I worked with all of them. Thank you very much. Honorable Chairperson, it is befitting that as we celebrate former President, Comrade Nelson Mandela and Comrade Mama Albertina Sisulu centenary, Mama Makaula centenary, because
Honorable Kenya, can you stop?
Ngiqondele nawe ngqo.
Honorable Makaula, what's the point of order?
Anganoma kuyiparliament kuvumelekile umuntu ethe namehla awu2 athi akaboni. Akaxolisa uminister, uDeputy Minister kaWater. Abantu bamaphumulo banawo amanzi kuphela inyanga.
Thank you,
Awuphenduleke, awuxolise.
Thank you, Honorable Kaula.
Uthi akaboni uvala amehlo.
Okay, it's fine, Honorable Kaula. Can you take your seat?
Uyabona.
Can you take your seat, Honorable Kaula? Thank you so much. Surely, the Deputy Minister will engage with you as we leave the House. Continue, Honorable Kenya.
Honorable Chairperson, it is befitting that as we celebrate former President Comrade Nelson Mandela and Comrade Mama Albertina Sisulu centenary. Mama Makaula said that we must also mention Mama Winnie. Kalok Mama Makaula talking about the 100 years. Now Mama Sisulu, Mama Winnie Mandela, Kaikiba, Yake 100 years, na isamkhumbula. Imbeba sibakhumbule kuba bagqiba uba bebesekho ngebegqiba 100 years kulonyaka. I quote the President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Cyril Ramaphosa, in one of his many speeches this year, when he once again reminded us about the road we traveled to achieve democracy. He always talks about both of them. He aptly reminded us during the ANC's 106th birthday celebrations that, I quote, Madiba was resolute that because we live in an interdependent world, we must learn from and take advantage of what is happening in other parts of the country and the world. He was fully aware that South Africa depended a great deal on international solidarity and was adamant that the ANC and South Africa will always stand with the oppressed and marginalized across the world. Our friendship, neighborliness, and good relations with the rest of the continent and the world is what drives our foreign policy. This is the fulfillment of one of the Freedom Charter's declaration that there shall be peace and friendship. It is the foundation of utmost respect for multilateralism, as it affords an opportunity to influence and solve issues peacefully as equals. As you know, our road to democracy was never an easy one, even though today you have denialists, counter-revolutionalists, and right-wingers who prefer not to believe that apartheid was a crime against humanity. We console ourselves that ours was a selfless struggle that brought about the rights to free speech for all. The struggles of our people were never built on privilege and exclusivity, which are entrenched on perceived superiority. Instead, they were based on the brotherhood of men, humanity, and its embracing inclusivity. Such understanding of oneness of humanity drives our relations with the world as we seek not to dominate, but peaceful coexistence, prosperity, and harmony. Honorable Chairperson, we need to constantly remind ourselves that our democracy was never manna that fell from heaven, but it is one that was built from the ashes of volcanic mountains of injustices, whose destruction was achieved through international solidarity and the will of the people of South Africa, refusing to be slaves in their land, in the continent whose soils are littered with their umbilical cords. Abantwana bomgquba. South Africa's foreign policy has always been driven by this foresight, which puts the principles of Ubuntu ahead of anything else in the sphere of international relations. Honorable Chairperson, South Africa is committed in building a better Africa and a better world, strengthen continental and international solidarity, participate effectively on multilateral platforms to transform global governance and to reform the composition of the UN, which still reflects post-World II era, to reflect current realities of the world. This is a critical role that is supported by the functions of the department, amongst many. Honorable Mkhalapa, there is the multilateral forum platform. The cause programs that are supported through this budget ensure that we give practical meaning to this commitment and vision. The budget, despite it insufficiently covering its needs, serves to support the department and the ministry with the necessary resources to deliver our objectives of multilateral platforms such as the UN, E249, G77, SADC, BRICS, and so on. We shall leverage our chairmanship of BRICS, among other things, to drive the transformation of these multilateral institutions as our fellow members, such as India, Brazil, and China, share similar perspectives, ours and our perspective to ours, and are bound by the similarity of our struggles to act multilaterally. We have a duty to enhance multilateralism, and as President Ramaphosa reminded us again, South Africa's chairmanship of BRICS this year will be an important tool to advance, I quote, South Africa's national interest and the promotion of a more equitable world order, close quote. The department will strengthen the vision of international solidarity on supporting human rights everywhere in the world, building and strengthening relations with other countries, and our renewed vigor to reclaim our position as an instrumental, influential player in African politics. This budget vote takes place in the midst of the need in world politics of a voice of reason, as conflicts, potential conflicts, and misguided political leadership seems to ignite more tension between the nations. The ANC-led government, through its long tradition of internationalism, as championed by ANC erstwhile President Comrade O.R. Tambo, whose name befittingly graces the cause headquarters in Tshwane, has better understanding of the importance of multilateralism in building a better world. We need to engage more with other nations in the continent and the world as resurgence of dehumanizing practices of slavery have been reported in our continent, coupled with the sickening worldwide problem of human trafficking. We support and acknowledge the inalienable rights to self-determination of the people of Western Sahara, and will work through proper channels to support the UN in its attempt to bring the parties back to the negotiating table. We also cry with the people of Palestine and promise to do anything possible diplomatically to support their cause and put them at ease. For as long as they feel the pain, we shall continue to feel their misery. Political dialogue to solve political problems is a road well traveled by us as a nation, as democracy was born out of that. And I would remind you, honorable members and fellow South Africans, that on this day in 1992, the second plenary session of the multi-party CODESA convention convened, mapping the way to our current democratic dispensation. Our engagements in multilateral organizations give us a platform to contribute meaningfully to the eradication of these evils and peacefully solve problems. We shall not spare any resources until we achieve these objectives of lasting peace, harmony, stability, and prosperity of all peoples of the world, including our continent. Honorable Chairperson, we have duty to continue to support the peace efforts in South Sudan and support the efforts of finding lasting solutions on outstanding matters on the comprehensive peace agreement and border conflicts. Pledge solidarity and support the oppressed people of Palestine. Let us continue to strengthen our solidarity with the people of Cuba, to engage the US through the United Nations and other platforms to remove illegal embargo that has crippled the economy of Cuba and tested to the maximum the resilience of her people. Maximum Honorable Chairperson, the Minister of DECO, Honorable Lindwe Sisulu, her Deputy Ministers, Honorable Landers, and Honorable Mahaule, our diplomats and the administration staff have raised their hands. They are calling the executive and the people of South Africa to send them, serve the country, extend the dialogue for lasting peace and harmony in the world, and spread the spirit of Ubuntu. We oblige by providing them with the necessary resources amid a constrained financial environment. When they come back, we shall request them to sit us down and report back and account on what they have achieved with the country's scarce resources. Siyanithuma ke mphathiswa, neqela lakho hambani niye kusebenza yeyele ifuna ukuhlinzwa. Utsho nombutho wesizwe, umbutho kaThambo, kaLuthuli, kaDube, kaMarhato, kaMandela. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kenya. Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'd like to thank all members here for their contribution to this debate, especially those who supported the budget vote. Since the dawn of democracy in 1994, South Africa has placed Africa at the center of her foreign policy. This is largely influenced by our liberation history, it is true. I don't know if the IFP would like to find their own history and give solidarity to the people who assisted them, but those people that assisted all of us here are those people that we would like to give solidarity to. Thank you very much for that confirmation. Chairperson, I have been relieved to find that all of us here are concerned about the plight of the Palestinians, that all of us here condemn what has happened in the Gaza. Therefore, Honorable Chairperson, may I then propose that we, rising out of this chamber, can say we, who belong to the Portfolio Committee on International Relations, roundly condemn the situation that spread out on our television screens when people who were unarmed were mowed down. Can I get your support in that? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to respond very briefly to some of the issues that have been raised. Both members of the DA have accused our ambassadors of as rejects of the ANC, where DERCO is used as a dumping ground for pensioners. I want to remind them that in the last 20 years, we have been represented by some of the finest representatives of this country worldwide. And 5 of them have been dumped on us by the DA. Yes. I want to say to Honorable Mokhalabo, all disciplinary cases will be dealt with swiftly. I have confirmed that all of them, all of those that have been handed over to us by the Auditor General will be dealt with. I've asked for 3 months, and I will be back to report to the Portfolio Committee about this matter. I also want to thank Honorable Kalyan for sending a message to me on the issue of the Pan-African Parliament. I am very conscious of the fact that we may not have paid as much attention to the Pan-African Parliament as we should. I'm also very conscious of the fact that they are experiencing a great deal of problems there, and I will attend to them myself. I will write to all those members of Parliament who have been deployed to the Pan-African Parliament to sit down with them so that we can assist them with their problems. We are indeed the major contributor of the resources that make that parliament run. So I take note of that particular matter, and I want to accept that we may not have done what we should have done at the time we should have taken our responsibility. Very often, honorable members, we in South Africa are criticized for having lofty ideals, defining the world as one that is driven by holy ideas and condemning a world that is driven by ambition, as though we believe that the coin of idealism still holds a currency in the cold, pragmatic world that we live in. Indeed, that may be true, but our answer to that is there never is any harm in trying. And what we do in the Department of International Affairs is make sure at all times we try. We try to solve the problems of the world. We try to solve the problems of Africa. I can report to you now that the continent is doing quite well, especially in holding regular, successful elections. I am glad that the Deputy Minister has mentioned that we convey our support to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe, and Madagascar, who will be holding elections very soon. We wish them well, and we hope that those elections will be without any incident. I'd like at this point, Chairperson, to thank the deputy ministers who support me and run around and be for me where I should be, for their unstinting support to me, for their unstinting support to the department.
Unfortunately,
their support for me is invaluable, and I thank them very much. Finally, I wanted to say to all of you, this morning I did call on all of us to come together to assist the Palestinians. I said that I would invite the people who represent the Jewish community, and I have since received a response which has warmed my heart. The Jewish Board of Deputies is willing to meet with myself, and I am very willing to meet with them immediately so that all of us here can help solve the problem of Palestine and Israel. Thank you very much for all your support.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Members are reminded that the budget vote on health will take place in the National Assembly chamber. The budget vote on police, including Independent Police Investigative Directorate, will take place in the Old Assembly. And also the debate on public enterprises budget vote will take place here in this venue that we are in. The mini plenary will now rise. Thank you.